We're so happy to have everyone here tonight. We're super glad to see everyone here with us for our day 2 of our Digital Family Seminar. And we want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you so much. If you could do us a huge favor, if you would share this out right now and make sure that you let everyone know that we are going live right now. And let's just get the word out. Tonight, before we begin, and I just want to quickly say to Sister Gabi, thank you so much for joining us tonight for another wonderful night. I already know God's going to do some great things and speak to our hearts and our minds tonight. But before we go into our teaching tonight, I want us to pray. And I want us to pray that God would give us the mind to receive tonight what He wants us to have and what to receive from all of this. And I want us to pray for our own families that we would receive understanding and we would receive more of what God wants to do in us. And I believe that God was speaking to us in a tremendous way last night. I got so much out of it. And I believe that tonight is not going to be any different. So I want us all to pray right now, wherever you're at, and then we'll go into our teaching for tonight. So let's pray. God, we thank you for this time that we have together. We thank you, dear Lord, for Sister Gabi. I pray, dear God, that you would anoint her, that you would be with her. And God, I pray that you would anoint us all to receive this word, to receive this teaching tonight. And God, I pray, let there be a move of your Spirit in our families, that we are never the same again. But God, that not only as we build up our families tonight, Lord, God, that we would build your kingdom and extend what your grace is in this hour. In Jesus' name. And everyone said, in Jesus' name. So I want to open this up to for Sister Gabi here. We want to thank her so much again for joining us. We got tremendous feedback from everyone. And those of you that are just joining us tonight, this might be your first night. Sister Gabi is a tremendous woman in God. She's doing so much for people all over the place. Like, she comes in high demand, y'all. We are blessed to have her, and for her to take her time out for these 3 days for us has just been amazing. And thank you again, Sister Gabi, and thank you for speaking into all of our lives and teaching us. So without further ado, I want us to get started tonight. Don't forget, everyone, we have, quickly, I forgot the number right there. Hold on, this is really weird to do this mirrored. The number right there, you can put in your questions. If you feel comfortable that you just want to put your questions into the chat in the YouTube live, that's totally up to you. We'll have question and answer at the end. Okay, all right. Okay, Sister Gabi, without further ado, now it is for you now. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. God bless you.
Praise God. Good evening, everybody. God bless you all. I want to give honor again one more time to, first of all, Pastor Johnson, right, and his family, the ministry of the church. Also to Brother Josh and Sister Jeanette. They're doing an awesome job with the youth. And I am honored to be here with you guys tonight, this weekend. I'm honored to be here tonight to continue some of what we started learning yesterday. So thank you guys so much for the opportunity to be with you. A quick intro for those of you who maybe didn't join us last night. My name is Gabi Reyes. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am based in San Jose. So I work with Santa Clara County, and I also have my part-time private practice. I attend church at Pastor Limones' church in Pittsburgh. So I'm kind of split between different geographic areas, but we all serve the same God. Praise the Lord, and I'm happy again to be here with all of you. So we're going to begin part 2 of our seminar today is going to be parent-child relationships, and we're kind of going to build on what we learned yesterday. So yesterday we spent the majority of the lesson talking about parental wounds, because a lot of times, we think that kids, teenagers act in isolation. We might say like, oh, that kid is just a trouble kid, or that kid is a always having this issue or that issue. But really, we all are interconnected. We're interconnected in the family unit, in the church, and our environment really has a lot to do with how we think, how we behave, and kind of the patterns that we continue. So yesterday, we talked about some of the wounds that parents can carry, and sometimes we can bring that into a marriage, into a relationship, and bring that into the home. So that doesn't mean that we cannot heal from that. Once we come to Christ, Christ has given us that opportunity of a new life, and the things that bogged us down in the past, those generational curses that we thought maybe could never be cut off, Christ gives us that opportunity to cut all those things off and learn new processes, learn new skills, learn new ways of living. And that's why we're here, really. So thank you all so much for being here this evening. So we will begin our session for today. And again, it's entitled Parent-Child Relationships from Babies to Teens. Okay, so the first slide that we have here talks about the developmental stages. And we're going to borrow from this person called Erik Erikson. And, he studied psychology. He studied the different stages of each person's life. And he landed on about 8 different developmental stages. And we will, during this session, go through each of the ages and the relevant stages, for each of the relevant time periods for each of the stages. So here we see this kind of color wheel, and it starts from the top where it has that orange piece that says early childhood, and it goes all the way in a circle. I'm sorry, to the right of that, where it says infancy, where we see a little bottle, the kind of reddish color. And then it goes all the way around to maturity, around the end. Okay, so the stages here we have in some detail. Let me just go back. Yeah, so early childhood, preschool, school age, adolescence, young adulthood, middle adulthood, and maturity. And again, we will see the ages that correspond with each of these stages. And the reason why it's important to look at life through stages is because sometimes we think, for parents who have children, maybe children with different age groups, we think sometimes that a young child can have the same capacities as a child who goes to school, or adolescent, or teenager. So sometimes we make that comparison of like, why aren't you like your brother? Why aren't you like your sister? Each stage of childhood has different things, different capacities that each child can learn. But it could be that sometimes as parents, we might be trying to jump the gun and expect certain things from kiddos that maybe they're not quite there yet to learn. So with this developmental stage, Erik Erikson thought that there was a crisis that took place at each of these stages. And like we mentioned, starting in infanthood to about 18 months, there was a crisis of trust versus mistrust. Okay, so during this stage, children develop a sense of trust when caregivers provide reliability, care, and affection. If caregivers do not provide this, the emotional attention, right, love, support, it can lead to young children mistrusting others. The next stage is through 18 months to 3 years, and this is the preschool stage. So during this 18 months to 3 years old, this is the early childhood stage, and during this stage we see toilet training often. So children in this stage need to develop a sense of personal control over physical skills and a sense of independence. So potty train plays a very important role in this age group, right? So again, this is between 18 months to about 3 years. Why? Because children who struggle and who might be shamed for having accidents during potty training, that can leave them with feeling shame and internalizing that shame, and they might be left without a sense of personal control. But success during this stage can lead to feeling autonomy, feeling like, you know, I did the potty training, I can go on to the next thing. Okay, the next stage is the preschool years and early school age years, so ages 3 to 5. And during this time period, we have a lot of exploration, right? So children between ages 3 and 5, they need to begin exploring. Success in this stage can lead to a sense of purpose, but children who try to exert maybe too much power experience disapproval, which then results in a sense of guilt. Let me go on to the next couple of slides, because I believe this will break it down a little bit better. Okay, so stage 3, we were on that preschoolers need to learn to initiate tasks and carry out plans, or they feel guilty about their efforts to become independent. So at each of these stages, we want to balance, you know, as parents, even as siblings of children, aunts, you know, grandparents, we want to have a balance. We definitely want to provide care and nurture and support, but we also want to allow for some creativity, right? For some curiosity. So at stage 4, the school age children, which is between ages 6 and 11, we have the basic conflict, which is industry versus inferiority. Children in this stage need to cope with new social and academic demands. They're starting school, they're relating with their peers. This will lead to a sense of them feeling competent, like they can learn. But if they fail during this stage, and again, we're at stage 4, which is kind of the lighter green, kind of a seafoam green stage. If they fail during this stage, it can lead to feelings of inferiority. Although feelings of inferiority can happen at any of these stages. Now let's go on to stage 5, adolescence. This is from ages 12 to 18. And it's characterized as the time when young people find their identity. They're either going to find an identity or they're going to end up being confused. And this stage, of course, all of the stages are critical, but this stage, stage 5, identity versus confusion, this is really key for our young people. Why? Because they are bombarded with all kinds of messages, right? From social media, from, you know, other people, from their peers. And, you know, a lot of what we hear from teenagers is, I don't know who I am. You know, when I was a kid, my parents wanted me to do certain things and I obeyed. But once I got to adolescence and teenage years, that's when I started to maybe doubt my parents and started to maybe think, maybe they don't know everything, right? So this stage 5, which again is between the ages of 12 to 18, this is during teenagehood, you know, and this is a critical time for identity. Stage 6 is going to be young adulthood. So we're not going to spend too much time on this, but stage 6, young adulthood, is between the ages of 19 and some people say up to age 40. So it depends on the school of thought, but they believe it can go from ages 19 to age 40. And this is a period of having intimacy versus isolation. So this is the period where young adults start to form close relationships, and it can be with college friends, it can be with their college and career group at church, it can be in the workplace. If they, you know, find a partner, it can be during this time, during this stage as well. So if we successfully complete this stage, we can feel a closeness and intimacy. But if we feel like we're failing, we will feel isolated during this time. Stages 7 and 8, you know, just for the sake of time, I'm going to quickly gloss over them. because we're focusing more on the younger stages between 1 and 5. But stage 7, which is sort of a peach color, right, and is a middle adulthood between ages 40 and 65. This is where work and parenthood come in. So this can be middle age, right? And during this time, adults can either feel like they are finding purpose, finding meaning, or they can feel stuck in their routine, right? So success leads to feeling useful and feeling a sense of accomplishment, while failing in this stage feels like just a shallow existence, that we're just, again, going through the motions, but not finding satisfaction. Stage 8 is maturity. So these are the golden years, ages 65 to death. And during this stage, older adults are yearning to give of their wisdom, to share their knowledge to the younger generation. Why? Because they don't want what they have learned and what they have lived to die with themselves, right? So it's important to engage with individuals at all different stages of life, right? Because adults can learn from babies, teenagers can learn from seniors. So we definitely, in healthy families, we want to incorporate everyone from each of these stages, and churches are a wonderful way to expose our young people to people of all different stages. So that's the wonderful thing. If we don't have extended family close by, churches offer this, and this is biblical too. Children need to learn from their parents, and they need to gain wisdom. And who gains wisdom? Who carries wisdom? A lot of times our elders in the church. They have lived through some very difficult situations and are here to pass on wisdom to the younger generations. So this slide follows what we talked about. It kind of summarizes everything that we talked about. And I don't want you guys to worry too much about getting everything, every crisis from each stage, every virtue, or memorizing all of the different age groups that go along with the stages. But I think it's really important to notice the existential question, or the question that brings meaning to each of these stages that we've talked about, so that we can better understand, those people who have children, what stage their child might be in, or even themselves, what stage they might be in, and the question that kind of characterizes each of these stages. So we see them here. Can I trust the world? That is from infancy. Can I trust my caregiver? Can I trust, that my mother will feed me if I am hungry? This is infancy. Can I trust them, or will I be left abandoned? The next stage, is it okay to be me? And that's in early childhood, ages 2 to 3. And again, this is during the toilet training stage. This is when kids learn to clothe themselves and maybe feed themselves as well. The next stage, which is kind of in the darker orange, is it okay for me to do, move, and act? And some examples of success is exploring, using creativity, using tools, or making art. The next stage, which is kind of like a butterscotch yellow, can I make it in the world of people and things? So this butterscotch yellow, industry versus inferiority, is going to be the school age kids, ages 6 to 11. And this is when we want them to thrive in school, when we want to expose them to different sports or physical activities, so that they can expand on their interests and talents. And being involved in Bible quizzing as well is a wonderful thing to also include. So extracurricular activities in that stage. The next stage, the kind of brighter yellow, and this is again a critical stage that we talked about, the teenage years. Who am I? Who can I be? Example of this are peer relationships, social relationships, youth group relationships, relationships with youth pastors, relationships with people in the church. The next stage 5 is going to be adolescence. So 12 to 18, young adulthood. and that's the green. Can I love? And the bottom two, like I mentioned, we're not going to spend too much time on them for the sake of time, but I just really wanted you guys to take a look at each of the stages and what characterizes each stage. Of course, it can be stressful to think, oh gosh, is my child succeeding in this stage? Am I messing it up? Am I being a good enough parent? Did I do something along the way to kind of make them go back to a certain stage? So I really want us to all take a deep breath, right? Of course, we want to trust in God and know that He has given us all that we need to do the task at hand, right? To fulfill the mission. So I don't want us to fret and worry that, we're missing the mark, that there's no turning back. If something has happened along the way, if your kids maybe have suffered some sort of trauma, or you yourself have suffered some trauma, and maybe that has been not intentionally, but maybe inadvertently passed on to your kiddos. Do not fear, right? Do not beat yourself up about this. Again, we're all here to learn new skills, learn new tools, and it's not a hopeless situation if you feel like, maybe I messed things up when my kid was potty training. Maybe I was too harsh on them, or maybe I was too lenient on them, or maybe I didn't, encourage curiosity or creativity. It's okay. I really don't want us to get stuck and bogged down on a certain stage, because again, there's hope. And as long as we're here and alive, we can learn. Okay, so I want to go to the piece about emotions. Again, yesterday we talked a lot about trauma and how trauma can live in the body. Emotions are real. Sometimes we try to suppress the emotions. Why? By going through the motions, just going from, doing one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and really not stopping to pay attention how we are feeling. So emotions are essential, right? Why? Because they allow us to really go forward, to survive. For example, if we are cooking up a meal on a stove and all of a sudden, we put our finger down and we experience a shooting pain, through our finger, that sensation of pain, right? That sensation of like, oh, wow, something bad is happening. That sensation of maybe fear, anxiety is good in that moment. Why? Because if we leave our hand on that hot stove, it's going to harm our body. So emotions have a purpose, right? They allow us to survive. But what happens a lot of times is, emotions don't last forever, but sometimes we will give room to them, more room than they really deserve, right? We will, if we are sad, or if we are depressed, or if we are anxious, whether or not we know it, our whole world can revolve around that anxiety, that fear, that sadness and depression. So I'm here today to normalize the emotions, right? To give them their place, but at the same time to note that feelings aren't forever unless we feed them. Okay. So in this slide, you can, kind of read a little bit about the feelings. So feelings generally come before thoughts, and they occur much more quickly than thoughts. Our thoughts can linger, but emotions, again, as long as we don't feed them, we can be angry in the moment, but go on to something else, and then we may not feel so angry in 5 or 10 minutes. But if we feed that anger, it's going to keep growing into rage. We can lift and calm our feelings so that our thoughts fall into line with that. So one of the things, I came across a suggestion, and some research supports this, is if it's hard for you to be positive and happy because you're just stressed out with the kiddos, there's one line here that says, "Oh, my darling, I would love to prepare a second breakfast for your discerning palate. Would you let me peel those grapes for you?" So just practicing this kind of happiness or practicing excitedness, even if we don't feel it in the moment, That allows your baby or young child, and even older children, but they'll probably understand what you're talking about for the older children, but for the infants, for the young toddlers, just seeing the expression on your face, even if you're being sarcastic, even if you're faking it, they're going to capture, okay, my mom is, or my parent, my aunt, caregiver is happy in the moment. And if he or she is happy, then I am happy. Of course, it's unrealistic to think we can be happy all the time. Again, that goes with the perfectionism piece that we talked about yesterday. It's unrealistic, but practicing an emotion, even if you don't feel it, oftentimes is going to lead to you adopting that emotion, even if at least for a few seconds. So faking a positive emotion can actually help you truly feel happier. We all have emotional and physical needs, right? But what happens is when those needs are not met, for example, if we go back to the stages, the developmental stages that we talked about in infancy and early childhood and preschool years, if our emotional and physical needs are not met, then we start to experience some fear, some anxiety, some confusion. And anxiety will come in when one of those or several of those needs are not being met. So we just want to acknowledge that. So one of the things that we encourage people to do, kids as well as parents, is to regulate the anxiety. Notice it, pay attention to it, but just by noticing it, paying attention, and verbalizing what the emotion is, you may notice that your stress decreases, your anxiety decreases. Why? Because you're not pretending to feel something that you're not. You're naming it, but then you're moving on from there. So one of the pieces of anxiety regulation is connecting the mind to the body. So one suggestion is to put your hand on your heart and say, may I be kind to myself in this moment. Some people might say, oh, that's cheesy. You know, there's no, what is that going to do? Actually, this will help to reset your brain and will give a message to your body that things are okay in this moment. Physical touch can be very calming, especially for children, for adults as well. I would encourage all of you to maybe explore what calms you. You know, for a lot of people, a hug, a warm, sincere hug is calming. For some people, you know, just a warm touch, you know, a touch on the hand, maybe a pat on the back or the shoulder. All of these things bring a sense of calm and help to reset whatever it is we're feeling. So if you're finding yourself during the day really stressed out, you know, just at your wit's end, having so many responsibilities, not knowing what to do, if another person cannot give you a physical touch, you can do it to yourself as well. You know, some people will give themselves this kind of hug. Other people, you know, can do sort of like a hurrah, you know, good job. Whatever feels comfortable for you in the moment, even just, like I said, just kind of touching your arm, that helps to reset the mind and helps naturally to calm it down. So sometimes we think we don't have the tools to calm our anxiety, but we do. And we can manage these distressing emotions if we just pay attention to them. And again, by paying attention, that doesn't mean we are letting our emotions rule us. We are just putting them in their place. We're saying, yep, I might feel anxious in this moment, but I'm not going to let that control my day. I might feel stressed right now, but these are the things that I'm going to do to help me get over the stress. Okay? So managing emotions. We want to focus on how the feeling is going to get better. So like I mentioned, if we're feeling stressed out in the moment, if, you know, bills are coming due, the kids require homeschooling and feeding and bathing and, you know, all these other things that have happened and that have actually gotten maybe more stressful during quarantine because everyone is all together, we want to take a moment and just think about what feeling you want to feel. You know, if you're feeling stressed right now, think about what it would be like to feel, you know, if your stress is at an 8 or a 9 out of 10, what would it be like to have your stress fall down to maybe a 5 or 4 or a 3? What expression would you have on your face if your stress level had dropped from a 9 or 8 all the way down to a 5, a 4, or a 3? This is why noticing what you are feeling, naming what you're feeling is important, because again, by naming it, that doesn't mean we are staying in that emotion all day long. We are just acknowledging it and then making a plan for how we're going to help ourselves in that moment. So we want to focus on how things will get better. Technique 2 will be chewing it over and acting normal. So some of the research that I was coming across was that, when we feel anxious, when we feel nervous, what happens? Our breathing becomes really shallow and from up here, from the chest, not from the belly or diaphragm area. We can, if we're feeling anxious, a lot of times our palms can get sweaty. A lot of times we'll have racing thoughts. We feel like we are in fight, flight, or freeze mode, like there's a danger right in front of us, and we're just on edge, just ready to pounce, ready to, attack, even though if we look around, there isn't really a present danger in front of us. We're just stressed out. Maybe it's a trauma response. And so our emotions can get the best of us. So this technique, chewing it over, this might sound very, very simple, but getting a piece of gum, chewing on that, or chewing, some people like to chew on sunflower seeds, or a toothpick, or just something. But gum is a really good way to evoke this next thing that I'm going to talk about. Getting a piece of gum, putting it in your mouth, what happens? Saliva naturally starts flowing in your mouth, right? You feel the taste of the piece of gum, you start to, soften it, the texture changes, and a rush of saliva, believe it or not, but that is actually telling our brain that it's okay. You can calm down in that moment. Why? Because when we are stressed and anxious, I would like you to pay attention to this, saliva is not going to flow through your mouth. And by having saliva flowing through your mouth, it sends a calming message to your brain that things are okay. You don't have a present danger in front of you. Nobody's going to harm you in that moment. So for those who like to chew gum, and maybe do it often, you might find that you feel calmer when you grab a piece of gum. Why? Because we are signaling to our brain that things are okay in the present moment. So, if you don't have, we'll go over different strategies to help calm and reset, but if you don't have time to do any of them, just grab a piece of gum. If you're feeling stressed out, chew on that, and you will notice, like I said, how your mind and body calm down in that moment. Technique number 3 on managing emotions is catching whatever assumption that you have and come up with a logical conclusion. So for example, if you're assuming that your kids are out to get you, that they're never going to learn, that nothing's ever going to change, let's catch that assumption. Let's catch that negative thought, and let's go to some logical conclusions. Maybe they are just as stressed out as you are, being in a quarantine house, with 5 different people in a shared space, 1 bathroom. Maybe they are just as stressed out as you are, but they don't know how to verbalize that. So what happens? They are throwing tantrums. They are being, quote unquote, rebellious, disobedient, fill in the blank. So let's try to provide logical conclusions, alternative responses to why our family members are responding the way that they are. So by saying this, I am not at all suggesting that we try to psychoanalyze each and one of our family members, because that may or may not be helpful. But what I am suggesting is that we give our family members and ourselves the benefit of the doubt, and just by believing something positive about others, they can start to believe it too. Okay. So now we're going to go into, some practical skills in terms of schedule, routine, and structure. During this time, especially, these are very, very difficult times. And you may have heard some suggestions that you want to schedule a routine. You want to have a structure. as much as possible. So this first line, try to be boring as possible. What I mean by that is try to be as predictable in your day as possible. So, try to get up around the same time. Try to, have kind of the same thing for breakfast, every day. Of course, you can switch it up, but make sure to have breakfast. Make sure to nourish your body, and then having some time for prayer, of course. Schedule that into your day. Know when you're going to pray. Know when you're going to get up. Know when you're going to eat. Know when you might, start reading or working if you're working at home or going to work. Know when you're going to spend time with your children. This is what I mean when I say to try to be as boring as possible, because if as parents or as grown-ups, you can be, as predictable as you can, that is going to lead to structure for your children. They are going to know, oh yeah, mom, dad, my aunt, they wake up and pray at this time. They have coffee at this time. They check the news at this time. And they're going to want to follow in your footsteps because you're modeling safety. Believe it or not, you're modeling security just by having a structure during your day. If your kids, say, I'm bored, give me the iPad, give me the Xbox, I'm bored. Boredom is good. Why? Because it allows kids to be curious. It allows them to be creative. A lot of us grew up in a time where we didn't have cell phones readily available all day long, where we didn't have, social media to fill every moment of every day. And so this generation is growing up with a lot of technology all around them, and it can have its purpose. It's great. But if it's not monitored, that can lead to some chaos. And so again, when I say try to be as boring as possible, it's try to be as predictable as possible so that you don't have to worry about, what am I going to do next? When am I going to squeeze this in? When am I going to, have time for all of this? If we look at our day, look at our week in terms of a schedule, we might find that we have more time than we think that we actually have. So then this next portion, right, the use of technology is important. Why? Because as parents, you guys are juggling. Those of you who have kids and those who don't, you may support other parents, right? Or you may know other people, who have children in their lives. Or you yourself may not be a parent, but you might have children in your life. A child's brain goes fastest in the first 3 years of life. But what happens around maybe age 2, we give children tablets. We give them an iPad because they're crying and they want to watch their cartoon or a movie. We might be so stressed out, we just need a break. So we hand over the technology like we would a pacifier. And the thing that's important to take note is during these first 3 years of life especially, but even the rest of childhood, a child's brain is adapting to the environment that is in. Their emotional skills, motor skills, social skills are all being developed during this time. So if we try to quiet their cries by handing over a cell phone, rather than doing the work on the front end and benefiting on the long term, what's going to happen? The child will be heavily dependent on this technology source, whether it be a video game, like I said, social media, movies, things like that. So we really want to manage, we really want to regulate. And a lot of researchers would say that kids in that age don't actually need any sort of technological device. Instead, they need emotional closeness from a caregiver. And if maybe you are not able to spend that quality time with your kid because of other obligations, maybe you work outside of the home, maybe you're a single parent and this would be unreasonable for you to ask. of yourself or of your kid, finding times of quality with your kids, so that once you come home exhausted during the day, that your kid doesn't automatically turn to technology or you yourself as a way to escape. So we want to be able to experience the real world without becoming heavily dependent on our technology. So practically, how can this look? For every family, it looks different. For every family, you can come up with what works for you guys. So one suggestion could be at meal times to not have any technology around, right? Another suggestion could be when parents or kids come home, that there be a common area that they leave their phones, and for X amount of time, nobody's going to touch that phone. And we're not going to present it as a punishment, but actually as something good. We're going to present it as an opportunity, to chat, to maybe prepare a meal together in the kitchen, or to do an activity together, to play a quick game. We're not going to present it as a punishment, because if we do, nobody's going to follow that. As good of a plan as you come up, the way that we deliver a message has a lot to do with buy-in. And we want our teenagers, our young people, to buy in to whatever it is as parents or as adults that you would like them to do. So some warning signs. I'm not going to read them all for the sake of time, but you have them right there and then. But one telling sign is if a kid feels anxious, if they don't have their technology around, if they are super cranky, if they're throwing tantrums, that could be a sign that it's too much screen time. So we want to take note of that. And again, it's not too late. I'm not trying to present a gloom and doom picture, only to say that we can learn new ways to incorporate technology into our everyday life, because let's face it, it's pretty much here to stay. But that doesn't mean we have to be controlled by our technology. Okay? So that moves us into personality types. There are many personality tests that we can take out there. Enneagrams are really popular right now, and a few others. This test, it's called the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator, or the MBTI, or some people just call it the Myers-Briggs test. This lists 16 different types of personalities, and the online version has maybe about 20 questions or so. The paid version, the version that psychologists use, has about 93 questions. But you can get a hold of this, like I said, for free online, and it's sort of like a mini version of the actual test, but it gives you a really good indicator of what type of personality you have. And the reason why this is important is because sometimes parents are a certain way. So yesterday we talked briefly about being an introvert versus an extrovert. So maybe you are an extrovert and you have a partner, a spouse, who is an introvert, and maybe your child is an introvert. As you yourself being an extrovert, you may struggle with relating to your child or to your spouse. Why? Because each person, introverts or extroverts, have a different way of looking at things, have a different way of processing, of expressing their thoughts and emotions. So if we are, it's sort of like that the expression, right? Putting a round peg in a square peg in a round hole, or vice versa. If we keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, it doesn't work. We might look at alternative ways of communicating, of relating. And this could be one thing that could be fun for the whole family to do. And if you don't have kids, if you are a single person, this would be good for you to do as well. Why? Because it helps you understand a little bit more about your strengths, a little bit about, just the way that you relate to yourself and other people, and what kind of person, you might be married with if you do have a spouse. And if you don't, what kind of of a person your child is. How do they process information? How do they relate? So the 4 categories we have here: introvert versus extrovert, sensor versus intuitive, thinking versus feeling, judging versus perceiving. And I don't want us to, to think if you are, so it's 4 letters, right? A 4-letter combination, either an I or an E, either an S or an I, either a T or an F, or a J or a P. Some combination of those, resulting in 16 different types. So if you are a certain combination of 4, and again, if your family members are something different, that doesn't mean you guys cannot relate with each other. That just means you can learn what your strengths are and the strengths of your family members are. So back to the example of the the round peg in a square thing, or vice versa. If we don't discover more about ourselves, if we don't take the time to really be present and to be curious about ourselves, be curious about our children, be curious about our spouses, we will do the same thing over and over again, and it's not going to get us anywhere. So one tip, like I said, take this test. Short version, a free version, is available online. It might be fun for your family members to compare what combination you are, and then you can learn different techniques that bring out the strengths in each person versus putting them down because they are not the same type of personality that you are. Okay, so we're going to move into some tips. Teaching. We want to teach our children from a very young age. And, if you didn't have this growing up, if you think, I don't have what it takes to teach my child, your child just wants you. You don't have to be anything else than you. You don't have to be a plastic version of yourself trying to imitate other people. We can have role models, and we can learn from other people that we admire, but we don't have to be, like I said, a plastic version of somebody other than yourself. So we want to teach our children from a very young age. We don't want to rely too much on technology. Why? Because that serves 2 purposes. When we teach something to somebody else, we learn it better. We're able to appreciate the material and learn it in a different way. And the person who's learning from you is going to be emotionally close to you while they are learning from you. And they're also going to benefit from the lessons that you have for them. One very important thing I want us to know is to not rely on your church staff only to educate your child. Do not rely on psychologists or therapists to do the work that you as a parent or a caregiver are actually supposed to be doing. Children are a gift, even if it doesn't feel that way all the time. We might love somebody and not like them all the time, and that's okay. But what we don't want to do is, again, kind of offload our children to somebody else to do the work that God has actually asked us to do. Our first ministry should be our families. Of course, we want to be faithful to the church in attendance, in giving, in ministry, and faithful to our jobs. But really, our family is our first ministry, and we want to model that. If we have been traumatized, if we have been abused growing up, that doesn't mean that we cannot heal from that. That doesn't mean that we can't break those generational curses so that our children won't have to go through that. And if you are a young person and your parent doesn't do any of these things, it's okay. You can learn, you can model this for your parents, even if they don't do this for you. Memorizing Bible verses with your child, it might sound, for some people it might sound simple, it might sound like too churchy or too preachy, but putting the Word of God into their minds will be carried with them in their hearts, and when they might be tempted to do something that goes against the Word of God later on, whether or not they want to, they're going to automatically recall those Bible verses that you spent time learning with them. So it's, kids memorize things all the time. Some parents say, I could never give my child a Bible verse to memorize. Like, it's too hard. No, if they listen to their favorite artists, musical artists, their favorite song, they have those lyrics down packed. So why not give them Bible verses to learn, Bible verses that, will help them? Of course, age appropriate, right? So we don't want to give a 2-year-old a chapter to learn. Maybe you do. But we want to use age-appropriate parenting styles so that we can plant the Word of God into our children. Okay. Another tip is naming the feeling. We've talked about this earlier. And again, by naming the feeling, that doesn't mean we are staying there. We're just acknowledging it. We are not carrying that weight by ourselves. We're putting it out there, whether you journal that, feeling, whether you whisper it out loud, whether you just say to yourself in your mind, yep, I'm feeling stressed right now. Yes, I'm feeling worried. Yes, I'm feeling a little bit hopeless, but my hope is in God, and I'm going to get through this moment. I'm just going to breathe right now. Emotion is temporary. I'm not going to dwell on this emotion if it's not helpful to you. Okay, so recognizing and naming the emotion is actually going to take the power away from those emotions that aren't helpful to us. So if we model this, if we model expressing our thoughts, expressing our feelings, our family members are going to catch on to that as well. They're going to see the benefit of that. They're going to be like, oh, mom, dad, aunt, grandma, they feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and feelings. Of course, we may not want to overshare. Some things are not appropriate to share with kiddos. But if it's a safe thing to express to them, we can do that. If it's safer to express it to your partner, or safer to express it in a journal or in your notes on your phone and delete it afterwards, please do that. It'll take the pressure off of you of carrying that emotion with you all day long. Another tip we'd suggest with family interactions, parent-child relationships, is using I statements, right? So not saying, you made me do this, you made me get mad, you ruined dinner, even if you feel like they might. We want to refrain from using that type of language, because when kids are young, they don't believe that you are bad when they're very young. Maybe as teenagers they think you're all bad, but when they're younger, when you talk down on them, when you say negative things to them, they don't think that you are bad necessarily. They internalize that then to themselves. They think, wow, yeah, I am a terrible kid. I'm never going to learn. I'm never going to amount to anything. And I don't think that that's the kind of response that we want when we're expressing our anger in the moment. We might let our anger get the best of us. But by saying things like, you made me do this, you made me do that, we are saying that we don't have control over our own actions, that we don't have control over our own emotions. And this is very, very tricky. This is very dangerous. Why? Because then we are saying that our children don't have control over their actions, that they don't have control over their thoughts or their feelings, when actually, Christ tells us that we can bring into dominion thoughts. We can control our flesh. We can tap into the Spirit so that we don't do what the flesh wants us to do. But by saying things like, you made me do this, we are giving the message that we do not have control over our own being. And that translates to your kids thinking that they also don't have control over themselves. So this cycle continues. One activity that you can do with your kids is practicing these I statements. So an example of it is here. I feel this when, explain the situation. We're not going to use blaming words, but I feel angry when when there's a mess all around the house. We're not saying that, Bobby Joe is the messy one, but we're just saying I feel angry or I feel stressed out when there's a mess all around the house because I need a clean space. Next time, we can work together. We can come up with some schedule to minimize the mess. Again, we're not placing the blame on somebody else, even if there might be one person who is more responsible for this than others. We are, as a family, we are as a unit coming up with a constructive plan to minimize the mess. So this is very different than saying blanket statements like, you're a slob, you never clean up after yourself. It might be true, but we don't want to give these blanket statements to think that people cannot change and that they cannot learn new ways of being. Why? Because then they will internalize that as not being able to control their thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. And because they can't control or feel like they can't control that, they will feel hopeless, which can lead to different mental health issues that we'll talk about tomorrow. Okay, so another tip, we want to model. There's that famous saying, do as I say, right? Not as I do, some variation of that. As parents, we can know to do the right thing, but sometimes, again, due to stress, due to, different limitations, fill in the blank, whatever situation applies to you, we may not actually do it. And so we might expect our kids to be something that we are not. Just like we talked about yesterday, the perfectionist trap. We might demand a level of perfection from other people when actually we might not measure up to that as well. We might think that we're the only ones who know how to do this well or that well. But when we say that, we are not taking the time then to teach the younger generation how to do things as well as we do. And it's this unrealistic expectation to be perfect all the time. And that leads to feelings of inferiority, anger, and frustration. So kids are going to imitate your habits. If you're a parent, if you're a young person, you're going to imitate the habits of parents, but also when you become a teenager, you're going to take into consideration your peer relationships. So if you think, I'm the only one who can model this, nobody else in my family is going to practice this, you might be surprised the positive impact that you can have on your family by just picking one of these tips. We covered a lot of different tips, and we'll cover a couple more. But really, if you just pick one and run with that, that is better than you not trying anything, and cycling in the same destructive patterns over and over again. If what you've tried hasn't worked all this time, why not try something new? What do you have to lose? So I would say modeling is a wonderful way to teach others to put your money where your mouth is and to create new ways of communicating, new ways of being. Self-care. We read about this a lot. It's a very popular term nowadays to practice self-care. But for each person, that can look different. This brings us back to being as boring as possible, right? Scheduling in your self-care time so you know what it is that you want to do. So this can include praying for your children. So that is self-care. Why? Because when you pray to God, when you don't carry that burden by yourself, when you are asking God to take this burden from you, you're practicing a sense of release. You are releasing that burden, that weight to God, and God is going to hear your cry. He is going to help you. He's going to give you the wisdom, the patience, the tools you need to be the person that you need to be for your children, for yourself. This next piece might sound very simple and even silly, but moisturizing. Having physical contact, with your body, even putting on, like I said, some cream, moisturizing, it sends a message to your body, to your mind, that you are important, that you matter in this moment. So even if you don't have time to, do some of the other traditional forms of self-care, moisturizing, you can do your whole body fine, but if you just do your hands, that sends a signal of calm to your brain. That sends a signal of, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this moment. Another tip that we talked about yesterday is breathing. So I've attached the presentation from yesterday to the session, but if you need more information, I'm happy to share more about this. But breathing, belly breathing, intentional belly breathing is an important part of self-care. Eating a nutritious meal, even if you don't have time for gourmet meals, 3-course meals, just eating something nutritious will help you feel calmer, will help regulate your emotions, and will help you feel like you have some control for the day. Also, being curious about yourself. I hear a lot about parents, especially mothers, saying, after I had kids, everything was about my kids. I neglected my own needs for my kids. And while it is great, to pour into our children, we also don't want to lose ourselves along the way. Why? Because we can become resentful, we can become bitter, we can become angry, and we don't know why. Well, it could be that you are not even tapping into what you are experiencing in this moment. And by just being curious about your own interests, about your own talents, that can help, again, kind of reset what's going on. Treating yourself with kindness and drinking enough water, hydrating. That goes along with being hangry. Make sure that your body gets what it needs. And drinking enough water is definitely part of that. We're almost done. Thank you guys for your patience. So we don't want to speak into existence things that we don't want to come to pass. Again, we don't want to traumatize our children by calling them names. You might think it's funny, but they might receive it in a different way. They might not, be as open to this name, name calling as you are. We don't want to use blanket statements like, you're never going to learn, you always mess everything up, you're the problem child, you never listen. And we don't want to compare them with other people's children. Okay? Again, reiterating, treating yourself with kindness. See yourself the way God sees you, and God loves you. He never gives up on us. So even as much as we want to give up on our family members, because God didn't give up on us, we shouldn't give up on our family members either. So these are some positive statements you can repeat to yourself in the morning, or when you're feeling stressed out, when you're practicing your breathing. And these are things you can repeat to your children. So also having, scripture that you repeat to your children and to yourself to help you get through these very difficult days. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our presentation for today. Thank you guys for, bearing through that presentation. I know we went a little bit longer. So at this time, if you guys have any questions, Brother Josh and Sister Jeanette are monitoring a text line, or you can also put it into the comments. All right. But I thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you, Sister Gabi. That was excellent. So I did have a question.
Yes.
Very first one that I wanted to ask you was, out of the personality tests, the different ones that are out there, like the Enneagram, and you were talking about the Myers-Briggs, which one seems to be the most accurate?
The most accurate? I think many psychologists would say that the Myers-Briggs is a reliable one, because the online version replicates the paid version, the 93 question one. And it asks questions in different ways. So it's not the same question over and over again. It asks them in different, like I said, capacities, in different forms. So there's definitely evidence that this test, and that's why I
Okay.
wanted to include it in here, is quite helpful. Enneagrams as well, there's truth to that also. And I do want to say that this is very different from horoscopes. So some people think it's okay to read horoscopes. No, that is not that is not okay. First of all, that's not something of God. But personality tests are different because these are researched, and there has been a lot of time and a lot of tests that have been put into place in order to come up with these different personality tests.
All right. Thank you, Sister. Next question. How do we create a safe environment for our children to speak about what they're feeling?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a similar question to what was asked yesterday, I believe. Similar and a little bit different, because yesterday's question is, how do we get an introvert to share, to feel comfortable to share their thoughts and feelings? So level of trust has to be there, for some safety. And if trust has been broken, for whatever reason, it's never too late to acknowledge that. If you have been the one, or if I've been the one to break that trust along the way, I want to apologize meaningfully, and let the family member or family members know that I may have messed up in the past, but I'm here. I'm here to hopefully make things better, and things don't have to be the way that they were in the past. So really spending time with somebody helps to boost a level of safety. If we don't see anyone, strangers, for example, if we encounter them, we might have a certain level of comfort and familiarity with them, but somebody that we maybe see and talk to and feel comfortable around all the time, that's going to create a different level of safety and intimacy than hardly ever talking to your family members at all. So maybe increasing the amount of positive contact, with others, even something as simple as a hug, that alone can express what words might not be able to express.
Okay. I hope that helps someone in here. That was excellent. Thank you. Next one is, what can I do if I let my emotions take over and I yell at my children? How can I make them feel safe again after I've calmed down? So I guess that kind of goes with what you just talked about, but I guess it's what we can kind of add to that is, it just happened kind of thing. So what can we do if we just got angry? What are some immediate steps we can do?
Okay, so preventative work is the best type of work that we can do. Why? Because you can say 10 positive things to me, or I can say positive things to you or to somebody else, but if I insert there 2, 3, 4 very negative statements, they're going to discount the 10 positive ones that I've tried to come across, that I've tried to relay. So we want to do as much as possible to not let it get up to that point of where we have an outburst, as much as possible. So doing these things like just breathing. If you feel your temperature rising, and you feel like I just need to release this, and you feel like, by yelling at somebody, I'm going to feel better, really try to catch yourself and say, you know what? I'm going to go to the bathroom right now. I'm just going to breathe for a couple of minutes, or, I'm going to go get a drink of water and then come back. I would say, first of all, try to remove yourself from that triggering situation, and then bring yourself back when you feel a little bit more calmer. And that's what I mean about preventative. Like, if there are some things we can do to prevent us from getting to blowing up at people, we definitely want to invest the time to do that. Either way, you're going to invest time. You're going to invest time later after the outburst, trying to calm everybody down, trying to tell them that they're not in danger. But you're also going to invest time before the kind of meltdown. So if you look at it that way, like a cost benefit, or like a time investment, you're going to invest time either way. So why not invest it in yourself, in noticing what you're feeling before you even reach that point of rage? If, this is a common occurrence, if this person, is triggered by a lot of different things, maybe it's a daily thing or at least a few days a week thing, I really would like this person to first of all take inventory of their life to see, am I stressed out about something right now? Am I stressed about my finances? Am I stressed about my relationship? Am I worried about tomorrow? Because if we're able to really get down to the bottom of it, to find the root of our anger, or maybe it's not as simple as that. Maybe we're angry because of our childhood, because of our past, because we didn't get the care and attention that we needed. And now here we are with the responsibility of a family without feeling like we're adequately prepared. That can lead to feelings of frustration along with everything else. So I would really like this person to take inventory of your life. Journaling is a wonderful way to do that. Praying is a wonderful way to do that. But really take inventory of what it is that's making you angry. Because if this person has an anger issue, we want to devote more time to it. So maybe it's counseling with a focus on anger management. Maybe it's verbalizing and expressing the feelings before it gets to the boiling point. Because like I said, after we come out with these outbursts, it's possible, definitely possible, to repair things. But it's going to take a lot more energy to do that than if in the very beginning we were to notice. So I would say to this person, if you've blown up at your family members, I don't want you to beat yourself up about it. I do want you to acknowledge and be sincere with yourself that it could be an issue that God is wanting you to deal with, and acknowledging that you're not where you want to be, apologizing sincerely to the family members, and asking them what it is that they might need. So your family members might say, well, Mom, Dad, I don't want you to yell at me when you're feeling angry. Like, if there's something that I'm doing wrong, just tell me. You don't have to yell at me. So really being able to sit down, create a sense of comfort and safety is important to repair this relationship. And if during this, we could say, family session, nobody's saying anything, like you ask these questions and they're the right questions, but nobody is responding to you, don't give up. Don't get frustrated. Just say, thank you guys for your time. I'm really going to do what I can to, take inventory, to notice what I'm thinking and feeling. And I really want to get better. Next week, you can have this same family session again. Take inventory of what worked and what didn't. But don't get frustrated if in the moment you're trying to repair things and you're being sincere about it, but your other family members, because they might be scared or they might be hurt or they're dealing with their own things, don't be frustrated if they don't respond in that moment. Don't give up.
All right.
Just keep at it.
Wow, that was super good. Thank you for that, Sister Gabi. Wow. Next question here, and it kind of goes with what we had just talked about, except it's from the other point of view. And it says this: as a child, how can I express my feelings to my parent when they may have had an outburst and have said negative words that hurt me?
Wow, I love that question.
Yeah.
So as a child, how can I express my thoughts and my feelings?
Yeah, when my parent has had an outburst and has said negative words that hurt me.
Okay. So for children, they may or may not be able to express what they are. They may not even be able to capture what it is they're thinking or feeling. So a great exercise could be to just have them draw what they're feeling. If they're able to write, if they're at a school age, where they're able to maybe journal, how they felt after mom or dad blew up at them, I would encourage them, to be able to journal. And if they're not at that age yet, if they feel more comfortable expressing themselves through creative arts, to draw a picture that they can share with their parent, or they can share with the adult of how they're feeling. I would also say that for the parent, we want to evoke a sense of safety. So, physical touch, you cannot overstate that enough. A warm hug, a sincere "I love you." Some parents never say that to their kids, and they say, well, my kid knows I love them, or my spouse knows I love them. No, we want to express that, and the more that we can express that to our kids, the easier it is for kiddos to do it themselves. So back to the child, I would say if they can draw it, great. If they feel more comfortable, maybe getting a stuffed animal and maybe acting out, having like a little puppet show, two animals, one being the kid and the other one maybe being the parent, and having them act out, that kids respond well to storytelling. So it might be very difficult for them to access their feelings because they feel scared, especially after an outburst like this. But engaging, like I said, a couple stuffed animals, maybe having another person, a quote unquote safe person, get in there as well and take up a stuffed animal and, go along with the storyline, that can really help a child begin to tap into what they're feeling.
Wow. Thank you. Last question, I think this is our last question. It says, what about if you're a grandparent? I know we should always respect the parent-child relationship. What are our boundaries?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a big question.
That's a big one. So like we talked about, earlier in the stages of development, each person at each stage of life brings a quality, to the people around them that is needed. So grandparents, especially in this day and age, are needed. Their wisdom is needed. Their expertise is needed. But I think sometimes it can depend, So if the grandparent is raising the child, maybe the parent is unable to, maybe they're lost in addiction, or maybe they're, overwhelmed and temporarily have given up the rights of their child to the grandparent. That is very different than a grandparent who maybe doesn't have custody of the kid but wants to be very involved in the life of the child. So I think, having an open and honest conversation so the grandparent having an open conversation with the parent of saying, I want to be involved, like not present it as a way to scold the parent, to say, I know better than you do, you don't know anything, because then the parent's not going to be likely to listen to what the grandparent is going to say. But if the grandparent presents it as like, I really want to be involved with my grandchild, I really want us to spend time together, the parent might be more likely to agree to something like that versus the grandparent pointing out all the negative things that the parent is doing. Of course, if we're talking about safety risks, if the parent is not keeping the child safe and the grandparent is seeing that, we definitely want the grandparent, to bring those things up. But if it's just a matter of personal preference, like maybe the parent, does things a certain way differently than the grandparent would, if it's just a matter of preference, sometimes we have to remind ourselves, okay, that is not, my grandchild is not my child. I am here to support, I am here to love, I am here to teach, but I'm not going to overstep the boundaries of my child because they're grown adults now, and just like the grandparent, I really want the grandparent to bring themselves to the age of the parent. The grandparent likely didn't know everything that they know now. They had to learn by experience. So similar to that, the parent might also have to know that. But if the grandparent can be, like I said, a positive support, can present this in the best light possible, the parent might be more likely to listen to what the grandparent has to say.
Okay, great. And We're going to do one last question. I think this one is a good one to end with because it ends positively. So, how or what can I do to help my child's low self-esteem?
Mm-hmm. I love that question because that shows a care and concern from the parent to the
Absolutely.
child. So I think one thing that could be helpful is to have the parent imagine what it was like for them to be at a similar age to the child and what they needed at that time that maybe they didn't get. Because just like we talked about this today and yesterday, these kind of generational cycles, if a parent is highly, highly anxious and the kid is able to tap into that, or if the parent says really negative things about themselves, I'm ugly, I'm no good, I always mess things up, the message the child is going to get is that they're going to do that too. So first off, I want the parent to take inventory and see, are there any messages that I might be sharing with my child that could be different? Or is there any self-defeating talk that I'm doing that I don't have to do? And if the answer is no, I'm actually a very positive person, I don't beat myself up too much about things, I don't really know why my child is struggling with low self-esteem, then we want to be curious about the child. We don't want to prescribe like, oh, if you just did this, like if you just lost weight, you would feel better about yourself. If you just made more friends, you'd feel better about yourself. Why? Because maybe the child doesn't know how to make friends. Maybe they really want to, but they're scared that they might be rejected because they have faced rejection before. So we really want to meet the child where they're at, and we can ask them, so in therapy we ask this question a lot, if you had 3 wishes, what would you wish for? Or if you had, a wand or like a sword that you could do, a scepter that you could do whatever you wanted with that, what would you do? And most often than not, kids will tell you what their deep desires are by just that question. 3 wishes. Oh yeah, I wish mom and dad would stop fighting. I wish, we had enough to eat. I wish, I had more friends. Just by asking that, you are being curious and opening up a conversation for your child to be open and honest with you. And by doing things like that, you might find that the child can open up more with you than you coming in there and saying, what's wrong with you? Why do you always put yourself down all the time? Just get over it. And it's a very different message than being curious about the child. So just like we talked about positive affirmations earlier on, repeating, scripture, repeating the promises of God, I would invite this person, if they're not already doing it, to walk around the house and say that. Post positive messages, in different places and strategic places where the child might come across that. If the child's not at a reading age, the parent can repeat those things to the child. Another thing I would say is social media has a lot to do with it as well. Depending on the age of the child, maybe they're being bullied. Maybe they're comparing themselves with their peers. Maybe they are spending too much time on technology, so it's making them feel bad about themselves. The child might not know why they feel bad, but let's look at these things. Let's look at the messages that we are giving our children. Let's look at how we are expressing ourselves, expressing things about ourselves. Let's look at their use of technology, and see where there might be areas that we can improve some of these things. Even if we do just one of these things, that can play an important role in helping your child lift their self-esteem.
That was very good. Wow. That was very good, Sister Gabi. Man. And that kind of almost will go into what tomorrow is going to be about. So tomorrow, you guys, at 10:30 in the morning is our last session. for this. It was just crazy to think about, but we're ready here at the last session tomorrow at 10:30. Sister Gabi is going to be talking about mental health issues in youth, the signs, the symptoms, and addictions. And so I know for some of us, 10:30 on a Saturday might be a little early, but I promise you this is going to be something that you're going to really, really get a lot out of. And it's going to be something that we're all going to need to know. So please be here tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. We'll be starting bright and early. You can drink your coffee and everything and join us. It's going to be a good time, you guys. And I want to say to everyone that was here, thank you so much. Please share this out to every family, whether they're from Revival Center or any other family or any other church. It will be an excellent resource for them. And this video is immediately going to go up right afterwards so everyone can see this. And you can always go back for this and refer to it as a resource to help you in the future. So, Sister Gabi, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we look forward to everything for tomorrow. Everyone else, God bless you all. Have a great night.